Sometimes an album doesn't just save a band's career, it completely reinvents it. In 1987, Whitesnake went from being a respected British hard rock band to one of the biggest acts on the planet. MTV couldn't stop playing the videos. Here I Go Again became a #1 hit. Is This Love dominated radio, and David Coverdale suddenly found himself standing alongside Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, and Guns N' Roses as one of the faces of the late 80s rock explosion. But behind the glamorous videos, platinum records, and sold-out arenas was chaos. The musicians who recorded most of the album were gone before it was even released. The band's guitarist, John Sykes, had helped create the record and then found himself watching someone else mime his guitar parts on MTV. Today we're looking at the incredible story behind Whitesnake's self-titled 1987 album, the lineup changes, the bitter breakup between Coverdale and Sykes, the MTV hits that conquered the world, and how this record became the commercial peak of Whitesnake's career. To understand the success of Whitesnake, you have to go back to Slide It In. By the mid-1980s, David Coverdale had already begun steering Whitesnake away from blues rock roots towards a heavier, more American-friendly sound. Geffen Records believed the band had enormous potential in the United States, but they also believed changes were necessary. One of the biggest additions was former Thin Lizzy guitarist John Sykes. His aggressive playing and modern style gave Whitesnake a sharper edge that fit perfectly alongside the growing hard rock scene in America. Other personnel changes followed. Neil Murray returned on bass, replacing Colin Hodgkinson, while veterans like Mickey Moody and eventually Mel Galley exited the band. John Lord left to reunite with Deep Purple, and Cozy Powell also departed. By the time work began on a new album, Whitesnake had essentially become a different band. The musicians who recorded most of the album were David Coverdale on vocals, John Sykes on guitar, Neil Murray on bass, Ainsley Dunbar on drums. Together, Coverdale and Sykes wrote nearly all the material that would become one of the defining albums of the decade. But as the sessions continued, cracks began to appear. Then they became impossible to ignore. When the album was finally ready for release in 1987, Coverdale made a shocking decision. He dismissed the recording lineup. Instead, he assembled an entirely new band for promotional appearances, empty videos, and the upcoming world tour. The new lineup featured Adrian Vandenberg and Vivian Campbell on guitars, Rudy Sarzo on bass, and Tommy Aldridge on drums.
I get there, and instead of John Sykes walking in, Adrian Vandenberg walks in.
It created one of the strangest situations in rock history. Millions of fans watched Whitesnake videos on MTV without realizing that the musicians they were seeing weren't the ones who had actually played on the album. It was a perfect illustration of how important image had become during the MTV era. If Whitesnake's success was built on chemistry, it was also built on conflict. David Coverdale and John Sykes were an incredibly productive songwriting partnership. Sykes brought blistering guitar riffs and a modern metal influence. Coverdale contributed memorable melodies, polished lyrics, and a clear vision of where he wanted the band to go commercially. Together they created classics like Still of the Night, Is This Love, Give Me All Your Love, and the updated version of Here I Go Again. But while the music was exceptional, the relationship behind it was deteriorating. One of the biggest problems came when Coverdale developed a serious sinus infection during recording. The illness affected his ability to sing and forced production to stop for months. Studio time was expensive, deadlines were slipping, money was disappearing. According to Coverdale, some people around the project, including Sykes, began discussing the possibility of finishing the record with another singer. Whether or not those discussions went as far as later stories suggest, Coverdale saw them as betrayal. When recording finally resumed, tensions only grew. Sykes reportedly wanted Whitesnake to become heavier and more guitar-driven. Coverdale was aiming for something equally heavy but also more melodic and commercially accessible. The disagreements weren't just creative, they became personal. Producer changes, long recording delays, and mounting pressure from Geffen Records only made matters worse. Eventually, Coverdale concluded that the partnership simply couldn't survive. Before the album even hit record stores, John Sykes was out of Whitesnake. So were Neil Murray and Ainsley Dunbar. The irony was impossible to ignore. John Sykes had co-written the biggest album of Whitesnake's career. His guitar playing remained all over the finished record. But when fans watched Still the Night or Is This Love on MTV, they saw Adrian Vandenberg and Vivian Campbell pretending to perform those parts instead. The feud between Coverdale and Sykes lasted for decades. Both men praised the quality of the music they created together. Neither seemed eager to work together again. If Whitesnake had only contained great songs, it probably still would have been successful, but MTV turned those songs into cultural events. The first major statement was Still the Night. Built around enormous riffs, dramatic dynamics, and Coverdale's powerhouse vocal performance, it immediately established that Whitesnake had entered a new era. Many critics have compared its epic structure to Led Zeppelin, while the modern production gave it a distinctly late 80s feel. The video introduced the band's glamorous new image and also marked the first appearance of actress Tawny Kitaen in a Whitesnake video. She would quickly become inseparable from the band's visual identity. Then came Here I Go Again. Although many casual fans think it's written for the 1987 album, the song actually first appeared on 1982's Saints and Sinners. For the new album, it was completely reworked. The arrangement became slicker, the production became lighter. Adrian Vandenberg contributed a memorable new guitar solo for the hit single version, and even changed one lyric. They replaced the word hobo with drifter, and the music video became legendary. Tawny Kitaen dancing and performing cartwheels across the hoods of two Jaguar automobiles became one of the defining images of MTV's golden age. Whether people loved it or laughed at it, everyone remembered it. The strategy worked perfectly. Here I Go Again became Whitesnake's only #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. Next came Is This Love? The power ballad revealed another side of the band. Rather than relying on heavy riffs, it focused on melody, emotion, and one of Coverdale's strongest vocal performances. Interestingly, Coverdale and Sykes had originally written the song with Tina Turner in mind. Instead, it stayed with Whitesnake and became another enormous hit. The atmospheric video featured Tawny Kitaen once again and perfectly captured the romantic, cinematic style that dominated late 80s rock videos. The song reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100, proving that Whitesnake simply wasn't just a hard rock band anymore. They had become genuine crossover stars. The album also produced additional successful singles, including Give Me All Your Love, helping keep the record on radio and MTV for well over a year. In the late 1980s, music videos weren't just promotional tools, they were essential, and few bands understood it better than Whitesnake. The commercial success of Whitesnake was staggering. Released in 1987, the album climbed to #2 on the Billboard 200. It never reached #1, not because it wasn't popular enough, but because it faced extraordinary competition from albums like U2's The Joshua Tree, Whitney Houston's Whitney, and Michael Jackson's Bad. Even so, it spent months near the top of the charts. In the United States alone, it sold more than 8 million copies, earning 8 times platinum certification. Worldwide sales exceeded 25 million copies, making it by far the biggest selling album of Whitesnake's career. Just as importantly, it transformed the band's reputation. Before 1987, Whitesnake were successful, particularly in Europe. After 1987, they were global superstars. The album also breathed new life into the band's earlier catalog. Fans who discovered Whitesnake through MTV went back and bought albums like Slide It In and Saints and Sinners, myself included because I was at that age, and it introduced an entirely new generation to Coverdale's earlier work. Critics have occasionally argued that the version of Whitesnake sacrificed some of the blues influences that defined the band's early years. There's certainly truth to that observation, but it's equally true that Coverdale recognized where rock music was heading and adapted accordingly. The result was one of the definitive hard rock albums of the decade. More than 35 years later, songs like Still the Night, Here I Go Again, and Is This Love remain staples of classic rock radio and continue to attract millions of streams. Whether you prefer the bluesier early Whitesnake or the polished arena sound of 1987, it's impossible to deny the album's impact. It didn't simply reflect the era, it helped define it. But as massive as this album was, David Coverdale wasn't interested in standing still. For the follow-up, he wanted to push Whitesnake even further into technically ambitious territory. That decision would lead him to recruit one of the most celebrated guitar virtuosos in rock history, Steve Vai. The result would be 1989's Slip of the Tongue, an album filled with incredible musicianship, another lineup overhaul, and a very different sound that continues to divide fans today. We'll dive into that fascinating story in the next episode. If you enjoyed this look at Whitesnake's biggest album, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out the Deep Purple playlist, which is on your screen right now. It has the story of Deep Purple. I'm doing everything from Deep Purple, Whitesnake, Rainbow, Gillan, and all adjacent bands. At this point, I'll be doing mostly Deep Purple and Whitesnake as they are the two surviving bands. But I might have a couple other side projects here and there to do. And that's all. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.